And I was totally muted that whole time.
I heard you.
Yeah, you heard me. It was good that first time. Let's try it again. Hopefully we'll make it better. So you guys, secure your tinfoil hats, buckle down tight, and hold on loosely as we soar over the rocky tops of the La Platas on a rocky mountain high. Get sucked into the vortex of the Four Corners and settle down snugly at mile marker 420 in colorful Colorado. Oh my goodness. It's Sunday, February 9th. February 10th for those of you across the pond and beyond. Welcome to We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. I'm so glad you guys could join us this evening. I'm your host, TessaTNT, and I'm so glad you guys are joining us tonight on one of our many outlets. You may also find us on Spreaker, Periscope under TessaTNT, Twitter, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iTunes, iHeartRadio, CastBox, Tumblr, YouTube, SoundCloud, TuneIn Radio, Deezer, as well as Podcast Addict under We Are Paradox Media. So tonight I have a treat for all my guys and gals out there tonight. I would like you to meet Mr. James Moses. And in the years since we had independent researcher and theoretical physicist Jim Moses on the show to share his insights concerning every aspect of our existences, a lot has happened which may be of great interest to our listeners. Humanity at large, sizable changes to many lives loom larger than at any time previously, and though it's hard to say with certainty what exactly they'll look like, certain events the past few months alone could provide surprising clues. So join us as we talk more about the science of existence, a planet and society cycling into what will surely be an eventful era. Welcome, James, and thanks for putting up with my shenanigans.
Oh, it's nothing, Tessa. That sounded great, by the way. Always nice when you get a retake. So great to be back. Appreciate the opportunity. I have a lot of things that your preamble and suggested. I want to share some important considerations. A lot's happened in the last year, and it could have a very profound impact. Not good in a lot of ways on our lives. There is some good news, but I'd like to have a lot more good news. Unfortunately, I don't, and we need to be very mindful and a little vigilant, all things being equal, given the fact that a fair amount of control is threatening to be taken out of our hands. What I mean by that is that policies, both federal and state policies with respect to two very, very important subjects, going to talk a little bit more about specifics with respect to those vaccines, healthcare at large, and 5G technology, terahertz wavelengths being widely expanded in terms of application across the planet. Very, very, very dangerous decisions being made here. And as I say, talk a little bit more about the particulars. But I want to talk, again, the title of this is The Science of Existence. And it is science that basically allows us to be here. I have contemplated exactly the mechanics that would allow for it for a long time, studied the natural sciences. Some of this, we may be retreading old ground talking about this, but based on discoveries that have occurred within the last 5 to 10 years, most notably Professor Gerald Pollack's at the University of Washington, that water provided its structure by particularly infrared light from the sun, it becomes a very critical consideration as to what elements of this particular ecosystem planet allow us to be here. And it's my belief that one of the primary ones, because it's the most capable, the most initially capable, as you're coming from outer space, to articulate, determine what forms are going to take shape on the planet, on the more denser parts, is the ionosphere. And basically, it's an interface, for lack of a better term, between the Earth's electromagnetic field and the solar wind, the sun's charge particle field, basically plasma, a variety of things that are being emitted from the sun in a rather controlled manner every single day. We feel it as the rays of the sun, but there's a lot more going on, particularly up above us, and any astronomers, meteorologists know exactly what the nature of that is, what is being separated out by the ionosphere, and how it is that it ends up being communicated down to the planet so that we have the ability the organic compounds which allow for us to be here, specifically our physical forms, can be maintained. And this is a very, very important consideration, because the first step in being able to expand the communications network, allow for 5G to be implemented, was a project, you may have heard me speak of it before, some of you may be very familiar with it, called HAARP with 2 A's, and that stands for High Frequency Active Aural Research Program. There are now 15 different arrays around the world, the most famous being in Alaska, specifically, I'm going to get this name right no matter what, I don't know where I wrote it, Gavina, Alaska, I believe, or Gavona, Alaska. And what HAARP's stated mission was, and it's certainly something that is a matter of public record, although they have been far less than forthcoming as to potential effects. I've talked about those before. We're definitely going to talk about them again, because they now loom larger, like I say, than at any time in any of our lives previously to when it started. You still with me?
Yeah, I was about to say, as far as the solar winds go, which we had that happening not too long back, I believe it was at the beginning or around the 10th of January, and a lot of my friends, including myself, were experiencing many different things as far as like anxiety, stress. A lot of people had symptoms of heart attacks, and some people actually did have heart attacks. Do you think there's any relation to what's on the solar winds that landed on the Earth here? Does it have an effect on us? Could it have caused the anxiety and such?
Absolutely. There's no question. And it's well known to science, although they don't necessarily understand the cause and effect completely, that the Schumann Resonance, which is the aggregate resonance produced by the shell between the ionosphere and the Earth's surface, is very much a cue for most life forms in terms of biological functions, circadian rhythms, so forth and so on. In addition, of course, to the 24-hour cycle based on the rate of rotation. There's no question that it is an element, at the very least, in whether or not certain people with genetic predispositions, again, that being a subjective consideration too, genetics simply being environmental insults that may have occurred far down the line before any of us were born, and unfortunately they're inherited, very much vulnerability to any number of different alterations to those referential sets of information that allow us to be able to function on a fairly regular basis that, relatively speaking, again, the subjective aspect as far as genetics goes. So yes, people are definitely more vulnerable to heart attacks during full moons, changes to the charge field, the Earth's charge field. Certainly the weakening of the Earth's electromagnetic field, as I've said in the past, has very, very profound effects in terms of how we're more exposed, more vulnerable to any number of different types of radiation. And it has definitely been a part of why cancer has been able to manifest as widespread as it has. In the past, when the Earth's electromagnetic field was thicker, there was a dampening effect. And I do also think that there is a correlation to an explosion of information, resonant information. In the Bible, again, I'm not religious, but I'm only using this because there is a historical note to it. The quickening is supposed to have explained that people's ability to interface or interact with their environment would be sped up, just as the word would suggest. And more information is being received by a greater number of people than before. And it's just a matter of being able to reconcile that information, which is a big part of health. In my physics model, it's critical. It's the underlying ability to evolve, how precisely a system, a coherent organic system, life form can continue to exist is as a result of being able to reconcile that resonant information so that the structure isn't compromised as a result. And I mean, that simply makes sense. You introduce the right kind of resonance, you can pretty much completely destroy any system, any structure, which is something that's scary to contemplate, but it is far more simple than people realize. And Nikola Tesla, especially, was somebody who demonstrated the whole notion of what I refer to as the diminution paradox, which is a more qualitative consideration as opposed to quantitative, that the quality of the information introduced into a system is what's going to determine how it's affected. Initially, absolutely, if there's more of something which is not good for it, that's going to bring it down faster. In the instance of Tesla's quote-unquote earthquake machine, where you basically vibrated an entire New York City building to the point that there were both police and fire trucks arriving in anticipation of a disaster, this is the sort of thing we're talking about. You could also refer to it as the butterfly effect. Very, very little input of information can produce absolutely just huge effects, widespread things that don't make sense in the context. And this is at the root also of what used to be called quantum physics. It's more entanglement physics, relationships established as a result of resonant information being recognized, reconciled, contextualized, or not. But getting a little bit back down to earth, so to speak, we deal with a situation where these changes are not well understood. It becomes instinctive. And it's hard to, unless we're really aware of what's going on, and I don't think we're even begun to learn or relearn what the significance of changes to the Schumann resonance are. For example, we had the highest peak ever on Friday, December 6th of 2019, 158 hertz, which is 20 times more than what had been the customary value of 7.83 hertz. Now, what this means is hard to say. There are people, qualified people, some perhaps not necessarily experts, that will tell you, oh, this doesn't mean a damn thing. It's just, and I can't believe that's the case. I just can't answer to them what exactly it means. But to me, there's got to be some significance, especially since some ancient cultures, as I've said before, had built into, archaeoacoustically, had built in a 110 hertz resonant value factor into some of their shrines. The Oracle at Delphi being a very good example of that. The problem is that as a result of the U.S. military, and probably in conjunction with other defense organizations around the globe, thickening was the mission statement. The goal of HAARP publicly is to thicken the ionosphere so as to expand the number of telecommunications frequencies, signals that can be supported by it, is that there are going to probably be, as a result of the ionosphere being such a critical part of our existence, there are going to be corresponding changes, just as would be reflected by this very high Schumann resonance spike. My gut instinct, although again I can't say yes, it's absolutely the case, you thicken the ionosphere, you strengthen the resonant value, you are definitely, the logic, and again it may not be sound logic, would follow that we would become denser, thicker as a result. Because you're communicating that information down, and how much the media that forms us, the organic compounds to which I alluded earlier, changes as a result of this new information, denser, stronger resonant informational effects being introduced into it. These are questions that are very, very far ahead of us, but I think we need to know about them now, because the effects aren't going to be. I think within the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to start to see things which, within that context, start to make more sense. They're not nearly as anomalous. Changes to the structure, evolutionary changes, which are so spontaneous, and ordinarily there'd be no context to say, okay, well, that's why there's an extra leg, or this or that. But it's all related to resonant information within the magnetic spectrum, the charge field. Every effect that we have around us is caused by, is a magnetic effect after the fact. Most of all, heating, because of the fact you're dealing with media that is, the effects are very subjective depending on the density of the media, tissue, and this is going to become critical with respect to considerations as far as both vaccines and 5G go. Tissue is not able to respond when too much information is introduced for which there's no existing context, especially when things are being changed, formulas are being changed, that it ends up disrupting the cellular communication network, so you're going to have mutations. The DNA is going to be affected, and those are just the most benign effects. We haven't even gotten into the really nasty stuff yet. give me a few minutes and we can talk more about it. And if anybody has any questions, please don't hesitate to interject. I'm not seeing the chat room right now. I'm trying to be mindful of that. But what I want to talk more about is what exactly the other effects of HAARP might be, because they're talked about and they're not unreasonable to broach, again, given the nature of resonant information within varying media. Talking about control of the weather, militarizing this technology is very much a possibility. We're going to talk a little bit more about specifics where that's concerned, but also looking at the whole notion of changing the Earth's electromagnetic hierarchies of response based upon different resonances introduced into it. And this is going to become very, very important if certain events do recur that are being talked about without a lot of people necessarily being aware of them, and that is something we have got to be in a position just as much as climate change, which is related to the changes occurring with the sun, with the solar system, very much so. Changes with respect to, lost my train of thought here. I can't think of it right now, but just a lot of very big changes that are of great concern to people right now. The biggest of all, asteroids. I was going to mention the concerns about asteroids coming too close to Earth and creating all sorts of really bad resonant values, very strong ones, or impacting entirely. Even just passing close by enough will create shock waves, resonant information that would disrupt our civilization profoundly, as you can imagine. The problem is that 5G also has the ability, because there is a natural component to the wavelength of terahertz that are used in order to power 5G technology, but it needs to be a very, very brief exposure, and I mean probably microseconds, in order to be a reference point catalyzation of what's known as methylation, part of the metabolic process, where there's the ability to transmute and utilize information that's being derived from digestive processes. Other things too, but that's the primary reference point. Any longer than the amount of time required to act as that catalyst for methylation, I don't know which word is correct, but you know what I'm trying to say here, causes profound damage to DNA, corrupts the genetic process. Information is just absolutely rendered useless. DNA strands are shredded. It's just a very, very nasty way to die. I don't know how else to put it. And when evidence of this started to emerge, the TSA, Transportation Safety Authority, who responded in the wake of 9/11 to make sure that airport security systems were far, far more stringent than they had been, realized that these scanning machines were exposing people who were traveling on a regular basis by air to unhealthy amounts of terahertz frequencies, wavelengths. They removed some of them at least, and I don't know what the criteria was for which ones were removed and which weren't, but that was the first warning sign. So for there to be such an absolute frenzy in terms of introducing 5G into the ecosystem, which was largely goosed by President Bill Clinton, whereby that communities, states, were not allowed, they were forbidden, it was against the law to broach the subject of health effects as a result of exposures to 5G, to microwave technology. I say this as someone who lost a brother in no small part as a result of exposure to a microwave repeater beam. He ended up with a brain tumor, and it's been common knowledge the Defense Department has known for many, many years as a result of brain tumor and leukemia clusters in sonar and radar complexes, places that were utilizing those two types of technologies, that exposure to microwaves, long-term exposure, cumulative exposure to microwaves would definitely heighten, at the very least, a risk of mutagenesis, cancer, leukemia, other types of autoimmune diseases.
Yeah, it's insane what they allow. Even radiation in our food that we eat, they have certain amounts that aren't even healthy for us, and it goes up every year.
And I'll be honest, I use a microwave. It's kind of, one of those things where it's the price of admission for me. It's tedious to go to the extent, as long as you're not exposing yourself too much and you're not using it constantly. Not all my food is being microwaved. But until we're in a position where we find a technology that allows for expedient cooking, because after all, we're dealing with a culture. It's not just me. There's a lot of people out there that just don't have the luxury of being able to stop for long in order to prepare food. There's no question we are being exposed. We have been exposed for quite some time, not just to microwaves, but alternating current. I'm just started a landmark book by a gentleman, an epidemiologist by the name of Samuel Milham, called Dirty Electricity, which has to do with compromises of transmission. When electricity is transmitted and there are interruptions in the line, it can end up creating very lethal distortions in the field to life because, again, of that co-opting tendency. The fact that it becomes a secondary reference point for biological functions. And that's not a good situation, because once it happens, it's difficult to be able to reverse expediently. It can be reversed with diminished exposure, but at the same time, there's so much of it. It permeates our existence so much. It's tough to get away from it enough. And we all appreciate the technology. I am not anti-technology. There's certain things I don't want anything to do with, and I make that decision. We all should have the ability to make that decision for ourselves, not us serve the technology, but it serve us. And there is a danger of it becoming us being obligated to serve the technology in a way, not to the point where, we have overlords, AI overlords, although that is a risk too. I mean, it's not just, it's not a fantasy. It's not science fiction entirely. I think that it's the extreme expression of what could happen. But what I want to say more is that we're dealing with a situation where there are changes to our environment as a result of electromagnetic frequencies and fields, but especially microwaves, that are going to have long-term effects. There are going to definitely be long-term effects, which we need to be looking at. And there are absolutely things that I want to try to start publicizing more. I don't know how much it's common knowledge amongst people out there, if it's a small circle, but there are metamaterials. As you're aware, Tessa, Nikola Tesla as well ended up conceiving, seeing, recognizing how much of a compromise to people's health there would be with cumulative exposure to EMFs, that he started to ask the question, what can I do in order to be able to maintain the structure, the organic structure and the inorganic structure, because he was going to be using these materials. They were going to need to last for a very, very, very long time, even with exposure to these various EMFs. He had to ask the question, what can I do in order to be able to maximize the length of time these materials last? And I don't, as someone who is very conscientious with the background that I have, Tesla was the son of an Orthodox, Serbian Orthodox preacher, minister, however you want to put it. And he grew up in a family that was very, very much aware of living a life that was not going to bring harm to others. So he definitely, as much as possible, tried to keep that in the back of his mind when he was conducting his experiments. And this is a lot of where this arose from. But he died too soon in order to be able to implement this, to find any practical way of fabricating something which would achieve his goal. Ralph Bergstresser, who did create purple plates, knew Tesla was able to, after 30 years, produce, or 33 years exactly since Tesla's death. I don't know exactly when Ralph met him, but it had to have been in the early 40s, I would suspect. In 1976, brought this product out on the market. And there have been definitely tests done, not completely understood, kinesiological primarily, because that's where the most immediate change is going to be noticed. The resonant frequencies, the resonant information within a field, how that field is restructured as a result, and what information is being communicated to whatever other field is in close proximity, say us. Our aggregate fields are constantly receiving information within the space of a metamaterial that is communicating it back to us. So that's a very important way of looking at maintaining health, general well-being. The idea is to find a way of being able to utilize metamaterials, aluminum being the most optimal. That is what purple plates are made out of. It's not an accident because it does have a matrix which allows itself to be reconfigured with relative ease and has a very wide variety of responses. Because of that, whereas a normal crystal only has a very limited one, because that's, even though there is what's known as a piezoelectric flexibility, the field ends up being affected by either pressure or heat when it's applied to a crystal. It doesn't have the same ability to reconfigure that aluminum does, largely because it's a metal. Isotopic considerations, ions, those things that go along with being in a metallic state. And I know a lot of this is probably very, 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 what's the word, dry? I guess I can use that. But this is critical in terms of rethinking the way that we approach maintaining health. Maintaining structure is maintaining health. Coherence. I've said this before on your show. You can look at coherence of both communication between cells, every part of a coherent organic system, and its structure as being directly related. And the example I would use is blood. If our circulation of blood gets cut off, that means the communication is cut off, but that also then means that the structure starts to fall away. You're in a situation where limbs have to be amputated. Mm-hmm. Organs fail. It's not an accident. This is the nature of our existence. There's a very underlying scientific aspect which has not been contextualized by conventional science, unfortunately, and that's a problem because it's not easy for them to be able to communicate outside their frame of reference, their areas of expertise, and it's created a fair amount of divisiveness, adversarial relationships that are not healthy by any means, but I'm hoping that as a result of beginning to bring these ideas out into the open more, there will be those who start looking and understanding what it is that I'm trying to communicate. I have to do it because I don't know that we have a lot of time otherwise. The situation in Connecticut is grave. There's no other way to put it. It is going to be a showcase, for lack of a better term, whereby 5G is going to be rolled out, fast-tracked, accelerated. They're already looking to go ahead and install it on the Metro North line that goes from, basically covers the shoreline, as the name might suggest, down to New York City. That particular trunk of the New York train system, commuter transit rail, this is basically just, it's going to be an ugly cluster because these people are constantly on their devices. They're going to be exposed to 5G terahertz wavelengths constantly. Every step of that trip, every mile of that trip down the track, I can't convey how much of a disaster to their immune systems this is going to be. The evidence is abundant. Thousands of studies confirm very specific effects identified. There are videos. There are definitely resources that I'll provide, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the specifics. Some people very much on the inside who are part of developing this technology are talking about things that are inconceivable, but I've alluded to them before now in this conversation, so we'll get to that in a couple of minutes. And, of course, they're now pushing another vaccine, removal of the religious exemption, which, without even consideration with respect to religion, organized religion, ends up being the last line of defense from being critically injured and possibly killed. And it's a disgrace. It's a crime, and it needs to be characterized as such. Vaccines are not safe. They have never been safe. They were safer at one time, but now they're just more dangerous than ever as a result of very bad decisions, lies, deceit, intellectual corruption, graft, The CDC is one of the most bought and paid for organizations, as is the Federal Communications Commission. No coincidence, and the two risks are definitely feeding into each other. Both vaccines, what happened with vaccines, and I'm going to revisit that because we talked about that last time. I think it was May that I was on for a short time, maybe June. What has happened to the human genome, as well as others, cats, dogs, animals that have been exposed to veterinary practices with respect to shots, particularly adjuvants and booster shots, are far more vulnerable to the effects of 5G than those who have not been vaccinated, because there's already a heightened set of responses on the part of their immune system. They have been hypersensitized since 1989 for 30 years, and the Congress did absolutely nothing to ensure, as a condition of the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act, to make sure that there was independent biannual testing for both safety and effectiveness of vaccines. Those that did the testing were intimately involved with the vaccine industry, with conventional healthcare, which was getting billions of dollars, if not trillions, billions of dollars kicked back to them as a result of this relationship. Now, maybe not enormous profit to begin with, but now we're talking a huge profit. Should the vaccine industry be taken down, as might happen, it would mean a loss of at least $2 to $3 trillion in the long term, billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars, $500 billion in liabilities based simply upon the determination of 100% of injuries by vaccines. Only 1%, it's estimated, are reported to the registry. Then the VAERS, and I can't think of what that acronym stands for at the moment, but only 1%. And already we're up to payouts of almost $5 billion. As of the end of 2021, it's $5 billion solid since 1986. And there have been steps taken to try to really push this in spite of a lot of people knowing that these things are not safe. I can't stress that enough. Do not believe them when they say they are safe. They may be safe, but the odds are they're not going to be at some point. And the information that these things are corrupt, the amount of corruption to the genome that has occurred since then has been communicated from generation to generation to generation, so that it's impossible to know until such time as we can identify the cause and effect, the epidemiology of that alone. It's going to be impossible to predict who responds, who is going to react adversely to a vaccine, and they're just far, far better. There were already far, far better ways of catalyzing immune system response, either, early after birth or at any age for that matter. I've utilized it for 25 years. Alternative modalities, resonant medicine works. It's non-invasive. It's not dangerous in the slightest, unless you do talk to a conventional scientist or a healthcare practitioner who says, oh, well, you're not getting... There is a lot of rationalizing that does not really look at the Hippocratic Oath and say, am I harming this person? Can I be 100% confident that the product that I'm introducing into their system is safe? I don't know why they don't ask that question, and I think more of them are starting to, but it's taken a long, long, long time to get that level of conscience, where people are really saying, I don't want to be responsible for this person suffering. And it's just the fact that the politicians have done so little to protect us, betrayed us for 30 years, if not longer. And just, there is, in my estimation, there is no greater betrayal in the history of the United States of its people, ever. There's nothing that compares to this. What can be said? I mean, how do you end up making amends for something like this? It's a hard thing. Confronting these people is getting more difficult, which gets into a little bit more of what I'm going to talk about.
Well, they're in bed with the pharmaceutical companies. They are living a nice, bougie life. So I think they care more about that than about the numbers, the effects that it has on people.
You're absolutely right, Tessa. And it's more of the same problem. How do you not hate these people? It's difficult because they have created such a set of circumstances in terms of our lives, they've been, as I'm starting to put it fairly boldly, our lives started to be systematically hijacked almost a century ago when alternative medicine was more or less devalued, and people stepped up because they realized there was ways of enjoying swollen revenue streams by inciting fear, instilling mortal fear into people who did not understand a lot about science, about nature, about what determines health. It's just a stack of crimes and unforgivable on so many different levels. Every member of Congress should pretty much be voted out of office as a result of this. There's just nothing else that can be done morally. And I am not a moralist per se, but this is just an outrage that people have had to suffer in addition to the physical injury, the character assassination, the insults of their intelligence, just an immense amount of abuse from all corners, every institution. The university system is one of the most intellectually corrupted on the planet now. They are absolutely part of the problem in terms of having relationships. UMass has a very intimate relationship with literally laboratories. Their intellectual property dividends are in part as a result of that, among other things. There is a real failure to act with integrity, but it's a societal problem because people are in a survival mode, and it's going to get worse. I wish I could tell you that it wasn't. It's going to get worse. I don't expect it's going to get better in my lifetime because there is so little recognition of what's really driving the problems that have challenged us so much. And the politicians, both parties, are incapable of responding in a way that will allow for expedient, resourceful solutions, and our lives aren't going to end up being encroached upon as a result, which is what's happening. Connecticut is becoming just an absolute disaster. The possibility of economic collapse may be most great with that state because of measures that are being sought by its governor, basically where most of the state is going to be toll roads, not going to help. And for me, it's a particular source of frustration because I've been involved, as you know, with a few different entrepreneurial endeavors, one of them being environmental engines, which had I been in a position to really get the ear of federal officials, let alone state, based upon the research that I did with respect to just one of our products, it would have eliminated, again, all things being equal, impossible to say the exact amount, but 100 billion pounds of emissions every single year thereafter. You don't have to be worried so much about pushing electric vehicle technology, especially in a marketplace where 2/3 of the populace cannot afford it. It's not even remotely an option. Mm-hmm. But yet we have people in my state that are talking about credits, and a lot of us, I just bought a car for $1,000 and it's what
Heck
planet
yeah.
are you on? Yeah. It's in good shape for its age. It's 14 years old, but it runs like a watch. And the point I'm making is that a lot of people are on a cliff. Gas taxes are being discussed by people who purport to be concerned about the environment, but if people can't function, so much lack of thinking is occurring. One of the biggest problems confronting this society is people are not encouraged to think. Because thinking is the first step in stimulating intellectual curiosity, in providing...
Don't ask questions, just accept what you're hearing.
Exactly, because you're serving the technology, you're serving the institutions which exist largely because of the validation we give them. That has got to stop. The relationship is abusive, extremely abusive. We're not in a position where we can have control of our lives because it's such a threat to their continued validation. This is psychotic on a level that's hard to put into words. What I refer to as institutional narcissism, that what they know is all that matters because they've gone through steps X, Y, and Z, A, B, C, D, E, and just a ridiculous amount of required steps in order to be able to participate meaningfully in the society. And this is not going to end well at all, because so many people are disenfranchised as a result of it. And the politicians are clueless. State politicians, federal politicians. They don't understand that some of these knee-jerk reactions, and I know I sound like I'm not conservative. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I'm progressive. I'm looking for ideas that impact people the least as much as possible, but at the same time, fix the problem, solve the problem. That a solution, long-term solution that is best for everyone, not lining the pockets of someone else. We've got edicts that, on the surface to environmentalists seem valid. And I'm going to bring this full circle in a minute. For example, there is a state senator who is pushing very hard, former member of the Green Party, who wants to eliminate single-use plastic bags. Well, the problem is that those single-use plastic bags, many of which are now biodegradable and are being used over and over again, I certainly use them in order to be able to do recycling.
I have a whole collection.
We have a store. I fought for the law in my community to make sure that we didn't have a ban. We've got one next door because somebody said, oh, well, we've got to be environmentally responsible, sensitive. And it's, no, you're not being, because this is not the crisis. Yes, it's a big concern when you're talking about cruise ships dumping plastic bags and bottles. And believe me, I know about bottles. Trying to dispose of bottles and the remainders of their contents is a headache. I understand.
Well, people are even building houses out of bottles now. It helps to insulate and has other factors.
But here's what I was going to say with respect to Lamont's and the Connecticut Democratic Party's Democratic members of the legislature's notion of doing this statewide tolling. I had a product that I identified. Unfortunately, the person who created it basically did not have a lot of interest in trying to assist me to communicate the value of it to first Connecticut. I had somebody at the DOT. By taking plastic and incorporating it into asphalt, it ends up creating a very, very resilient road surface that lasts twice as long, costs half as much, and frees up a lot of people that would be doing the work on these roads, having to resurface. Potholes are gone as a result of it. You never have to worry about potholes again with this material. The problem is that the person who created it, and I'm not going to say where they are, just did not want to help me, did not want to. He was obstinate. I don't understand it unless they're looking to end up exploiting the market themselves, because it millions and millions of dollars in terms of the Northeast states. We have probably one of the worst problems with road quality on the planet, in the Northeast states, including Pennsylvania, which is notorious for it, Delaware, New Jersey. All of these states, which would have stood to benefit immensely, would have reduced their costs for road surfacing, mileage, all these considerations by millions and millions, if not billions of dollars. It all went away because I couldn't end up being able to convince this person. Maybe he ends up doing it himself. But the point I'm making is they don't need to be enacting these tolls. It's insanity of the first order. And I am not a capitalist per se. I'm not a socialist either. Again, I sound like I'm playing both sides. I see a very different approach down the middle, but also looking at the ability to redefine how people derive the means to support themselves financially, materially. I think we're moving towards that because decentralization, particularly with respect to federal government, is happening. It's coming. This is not sustainable. So many aspects of our lives are not sustainable. And we're now entering a period where there are a lot of existential threats, including 5G, including changes to the ecosystem, but also including possible cataclysmic events. And that's where things really, really get to be nightmarish. But the evidence exists. Whether or not it's conclusive, it's hard to say. And basically what it entails, a lot of your listeners I know are familiar with the lost continents of Atlantis, Lemuria, so forth and so on. And I do believe that there was a network of civilizations very similar with the same general imprint. And one of them absolutely in the center of the Atlantic, Azores still being a remnant of it. There are buildings on the bottom. It only makes sense. The last ice age was followed by what's known as, and I don't know if you've heard of this before, the Younger Dryas era. And a gentleman who you will see occasionally on Ancient Aliens, but is respected by a lot of his peers, Robert Schoch, who talked about the fact that the Sphinx indicates water damage of probably thousands of years earlier in origin, also has identified in Greenland ice core samples clear evidence of an unprecedentedly powerful solar flare that occurred right around the time that Younger Dryas ended. And it would have corresponded also with the ends of these civilizations, the cataclysms. Einstein and Charles Hapgood, who was responsible for a book, he actually was at UMass, if I'm not mistaken, wrote a book called Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings. So you may have heard of it. You may have heard of the Admiral Piri Reis map, where the Antarctica is without any ice or snow on it. You can see the coastline, there's a lot of accuracy, although the distribution isn't correct necessarily. Those coastlines are accurate in terms of proportion. They basically identified a dynamic, a mechanism whereby, and someone else ended up writing a book, a gentleman by the name of Chan Thomas, and two books actually. The first one was called The Earth's Shifting Crust in 1958. He wrote another book called Adam and Eve Story, which basically said point blank the potential existed during solar minimums, which it is widely thought is coming to us, whereby we will have what's known as a mini ice age, similar perhaps, maybe not as severe as the Younger Dryas era, within the next 30 to 50 years that will last probably between 50 and 70. But it's at that moment in time, as a result of compromises to the entanglement between the Earth's electromagnetic field and the solar wind, that there can be catastrophic crustal displacement, for lack of a better term, whereby the planet ends up tipping 90 degrees because of the reversal in magnetic charge between poles. The polar shift, as you may have heard the term. The CIA ended up classifying Thomas's book, and it's easy enough to say, okay, well, they didn't want to see a panic caused as a result of it, and understandably so, particularly with that society which did not have the same level of understanding relationship with advanced, what now would seem to them very advanced technology. But at the same time, you have to ask yourself the question, because it is scientifically feasible. Einstein did explain that as a result of the combination of the two dynamics, an accumulation, because of the colder temperatures during a solar minimum, the accumulation of the ice and snow at the polar regions, combined with the compromise of the magnetic field because of cosmic rays, that all of a sudden now we're far more easily introduced into the magnetic field because it's weakened. We're in a state right now where it's considerably weakened from where it was. I talked about it earlier on, making us more vulnerable to various types of diseases caused by radiation, mutation by cancer, mutation causing cancer. These are big challenges, and we're not talking about them, and we need to at least have a contingency as much as we do for asteroids, meteors, climate change, which again, if you're looking at the full spectrum of climate changes, you understand this has a direct relationship to the changes that are occurring with the sun. Cyclical changes, sunspot minimums along with solar minimums, meaning that we are far more vulnerable if this model is correct. And we need to be having something in place that acknowledges it, because it could be very soon. It could be less than 100 years that this cataclysm occurs. And certainly there's enough evidence in literature throughout history that we live in a time where there are expectations of Earth changes.
Yeah, and Jim in the chat is saying, we are in a solar minimum now, and they are also increasing stock of seeds in the seed banks around the world. Scary times.
Yep, that's true, Jim. There are definitely people in a position to be able to stockpile, which does come back to an overall problem that a lot of the quote-unquote 99%, or to be really grim and talk about the Georgia, my mind's not, Guidestones. The Guidestones, and there was confirmation that a few people are talking about looking to eliminate 90% of the Earth's population in order for quote-unquote survive, recover, heal. This is not fiction. This is real. I have read accounts by people actually saying this, and the Georgia Guidestones are reflective of it, where there would basically be 500 million people left on the planet if they have their way. I believe that's the figure, if I'm not mistaken. But the point I'm making is you're dealing with a situation where resources are becoming harder and harder for people that are not already in an economically sound state, such as myself, probably such as a lot of you. And it has nothing to do with knowledge. It has nothing to do, we know more than a lot of people out there. And it doesn't necessarily matter. The problem is, we don't have the ability, we don't have the representation that recognizes our value to arriving at these solutions for both ourselves and for so many other people around the planet. Life in general, not just us, but other forms of life, animals, plants. There are things that can be done. Technology exists that would change our existence in a way that we would be freed up, and we would be able to just live without having to be so anxious about where the next dollar paycheck came from. We could just contemplate. We would not have imperatives the way that we do. Although I think the nature of humanity is such, and I don't fit in where this is concerned at all, there has to be an imperative. There's always got to be a challenge. There's always got to be something. It's just, this is, again, we're dealing with a culture that is very institutionally narcissistic. Oh, you've got to be better than this. You got to be, constantly be better, better yourself. Sometimes it's okay to just be you. If you know that you're good, if you know that you have value, but this is not a culture. This economy is based upon erosion of confidence in our own value. And that is a lot of the reason why we are going through the hell we are right now, because nobody really is doing enough to give us the resources to resolve these problems. And it's going to get worse, and more people are going to be affected. Regardless of what was said in the State of the Union, we need a universal basic income so people can go ahead and start investing in their own futures without anyone telling them how to invest it, in as much as specific amounts may be dedicated to resources provided, training, expedient ones, not ones that have expectations of us not being able to do things far more immediate. Again, going back to the expectations with respect, the university system is corrupt in terms of the inability to recognize value and also acknowledge that it's not necessary in order to participate meaningfully. But we're dealing with two consecutive generations that have been conditioned to believe that they can't be part of the society unless they do X, Y, and Z, as I alluded to before.
So
and it's simply not. It's not true. There are very, very bright, perceptive souls out there that know what are happening and want to be doing more than they are. And unfortunately, we're prone to depression. We get frustrated because it's a natural response. It's not brain chemicals. It's not an imbalance. It's the frustration with the system of which we're part to not give us what we need in order to change those things we deem necessary in order to be happy. And there's nothing wrong with being happy. Problem being is that we live in a society that's very much rooted in Calvinistic guilt. Not Catholic, but Catholic's part of it. Calvinist is more Protestant. Both sects do end up exploiting, manipulating guilt. And that Calvinism basically, more or less without saying it, advises against happiness. You can look at the Puritan expression of it. No dancing, no singing. God, no sex. Oh my God, that's just a mortal sin.
Right.
We shouldn't be happy. We shouldn't have pleasure. That makes us vulnerable. That means we're corrupting our relationship with God. There's just so much wrong-headed information, and I understand it's important to be able to have a measure of discipline, to know what it is you want, and to be able to focus, really dedicate yourself to those things. But the easier it is to do that doesn't mean people aren't going to value it. I hear this again and again and again, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that they've never had the opportunity to enjoy it. There's always that guilt attached to enjoying what they end up having. And I'm not saying into perpetuity. One of the problems with this culture, this economy, the economic model is people constantly feel they have to have more. And sometimes, I'm not judging anybody. I know what I want. I know what's important to me, what has meaning. But a lot of people, they feel there as an expectation for them to want more. Oh, I need the promotion. Well, if I'm, you know, it doesn't matter if I'm happy doing what I'm doing. What's wrong with me if I haven't advanced? You know, what do I have to show for my life? Now, I think that's changed a lot as hierarchical structures are starting to crumble across the board. But there's still a lot of people that are caught up in that paradigm, in that hamster wheel. And that's what needs to change. We need leadership that can recognize and respond expediently to these problems, that they care, that there is an expectation for them to care, not an expectation for us to meet their expectations, but for them to really understand they serve us. We don't serve them. They serve us. We elect them. We hire them to look out for our interests. And when they're not doing that, when they refuse to recognize, they're in a state of denial that they're not looking out for our interests, they should not be in office, because they're now becoming a risk to our interests and our health, which is exactly what's happened. And it's happened for 30 years. And it's no coincidence that it began in the 80s, because that's when a lot of the underpinnings, although not all of them, it goes back for much further in terms of the earliest stirrings, but a lot of the underpinnings to cement so much of what is now threatening us began in the 80s. It all was about taking power away from the people. As much as it was produced, you know, it was, I should say, it was sold as being for the people. It was not for the people. And we've seen it in parties. They don't give us the ability to make choices for our lives. The presidential candidates, all of them are not talking about this, not a one. They're all products of a culture, including Bernie Sanders, who is vaunted, but it has not lived up to a lot of what he formally said, as I've talked about, in terms of people having control of their lives. They don't understand what's happening, and it's up to us, all of us, and you know, that are listening as much as we're capable. And I know it's not fun talking to a legislator, talking to a congressman or a congressperson is daunting. And I've done it. I've done it a lot. I certainly, my own representative, I can't talk to the feds anymore, really, to speak of. I did as early as recently as early last year, but there's just what has emerged as a result of the presidential elections, presidential campaigns, particularly with Elizabeth Warren. These people, I want nothing to do with them. And I don't like saying that, but it really does come down to that. They have nothing in common with me. Nothing.
Well, I hate to interrupt, but we do have to go to our first musical break. And on this break, we have King Cinnamon, who is from Biafra, Nigeria, with Fantastic and Rosie. Then we have Hosni Bronx, who is originally from Jamaica, but also spends a lot of his time in the Bronx of New York with Dance as a Lion. So you guys don't go anywhere. We'll be right back right after this musical break.
We swap on
Still with me?
Like my water bam bam. King Cinnamon. Oh shit, baddest. Take your bam bam anywhere you day. Play your bam bam, it is a Friday. Come on, let's go, it is a holiday. Anything you want, baby, I will pay. Take your bam bam anywhere you day. Play your bam bam, it is a Friday. Come on, let's go, it is a holiday. Anything you want, baby, I will pay. Fantastic. Baby girl, you romantic. Fantastic. Baby girl, you romantic. Put your brother, baby, gather something. Come on closer, baby, gather 19. I know you better, but I am the king. Your backside bigger than Bombay. Baby girl, broncotum. I like the way you wind your broncotum. Baby girl, broncotum. I like the way you wind your broncotum. Jamaica, Ghana. Shout out to the ladies in Asia, Nigeria, South Africa. Say me love you. Please me, baby. Yeah. Turn up from you. Yeah. Take your bam bam anywhere you day. Play your bam bam, it is a Friday. Come on, let's go, it is a holiday. Anything you want, baby, I will pay. Shake your bam bam anywhere you day. Play your bam bam, it is a Friday. Come on, let's go, it is a holiday. love, give me love. Show me love, show me love. Oh, give me love, give me love. Me want you, me love you. Give me love, give me love. Oh, give me love, give me love. Hey, please me, baby. Oh. Yeah, turn up from you. Yeah, take your bam bam anywhere you day. Throw your bam bam, it is a Friday. Come on, let's go, it is a holiday. Anything you want, baby, I will pay. Shake your bam bam anywhere you day. Throw your bam bam, it is a Friday. Come on, let's go, it is a holiday. Anything you want, baby, I will pay. Fantastic. Baby girl, you romantic. Fantastic. Baby girl, you romantic. King Cinnamon. You know what I'm saying?
We spot on the mix. Lift it all.
Oh yeah, it's funky on the beats.
Suck my boobs, you got my body loose. Anytime you touch me, you got me confused. Suck my boobs, you got my body loose. Anytime you touch me, you got me confused. Cinnamon, do it softly. I said you wine your body, eat the sweetie. Make it rock my body, I am feeling horny. Make it touch my body, I am feeling sweetie. Suck my boobs, you got my body loose. Anytime you touch me, you got me confused. Suck my boobs, you got my body loose. Anytime you touch me, you got me confused. All my men, they wear out. All my guys, they wear out. Imarama, Rosie. Imarama, Rosie. All my men, they wear out. All my guys, they wear out. Imarama, Rosie. Imarama, Rosie. Mukomukeji, go bere muketa. Oya mukomukeji, oya bere muketa. Daddy mu ekon, omo ni pe mukeji. Daddy bere muketa, omo ni fún mi lẹ́yìn. Daddy fisi, omo ni ẹjọ́. Daddy saucy, omo ni ẹjọ́. Daddy kosi, omo ni ẹjọ́. Daddy trying pussy, omo ni ẹjọ́. Daddy and his baby, them there for corner. Daddy begin the touch and the girl they holla. Now daddy begin the open the shirt collar. Now something come out. Daddy begin the suck am. Daddy mu ekon, omo ni pe mukeji. Daddy bere muketa, omo ni fún mi lẹ́yìn. Daddy fisi, omo ni ẹjọ́. Daddy saucy, omo ni ẹjọ́. All my men they wear out. All my guys they wear out. Imarama, Rosie. Imarama, Rosie. All my men they wear out. All my guys they wear out. Imarama, Rosie. Imarama, Rosie. Suck my boobs, you got my body loose. Anytime you touch me, you got me confused. Suck my boobs, you got my body loose. Anytime you touch me, you got me confused. Cinnamon, do it softly. I see the wine your body, eat the sweetie. Make it rock my body, I am feeling horny. Make it touch my body, I am feeling sweetie. Suck my boobs, you got my body loose. Anytime you touch me, you got me confused. Suck my boobs, you got my body loose. Anytime you touch me, you got me confused. Fisi, amani, ejo. Daddy saucy, amani, ejo. Daddy kosi, amani, ejo. Daddy kahin kosi, amani, ejo. Daddy count that, amani, ejo. Daddy comfort, daddy consist, amani, ejo. Daddy count 8, daddy 120, amani, ejo. Daddy 18, daddy 240, amani, ejo. Daddy 36. Daddy and the baby, them there for corner. Daddy begin the touch and the girl they holla. Daddy begin the open the shirt collar. Something come out. Daddy begin the sucker. Daddy mu ekon, omo ni pe mukeji. Daddy bere muketa, omo ni fún mi lẹ́yìn. Daddy fisi, omo ni ẹjọ́. Daddy saucy, omo ni ẹjọ́. All my men they wear out. All my guys they wear out. Imarama, Rosie. Imarama, Rosie.
Oh yeah, it's funky on the beats.
We don't want your illusion. We don't want your education. We don't want your frustration. You may move up, rescue your history. We celebrate the love coming from God. We celebrate the conquer of Judah love. Rest a dance as a lion. In this place full of positive vibe. Yeah. Rest a dance for all nations. You are my rage, you are my strength, you are my love, you are my heart. Rasta rose as a lion. Selassie I only Mount Zion. Oh, people are irate. In this place we have the fire. Dance, reggae music come from Jah. Dance, around this place, Rasta. Dance, it's our chance to unite and chant the word. People in love, people in love, people in love, people in love. Yeah. Humanity want to protect humanity. We have to save people from poverty. We don't want your frustration. We don't want your ambush Babylon.
Welcome back, you guys, and thanks so much for listening tonight on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. Tonight we're joined by James Moses, and we've been touching on several scary but true facts that are going on in our world today. And we do have some questions in the chat room. Welcome back, James, and thanks so much for hanging out with us and educating us. And, you know, I think we're all kind of hiding behind our blankets. And
That's understandable at this time of year. Well, probably around most of the country.
So Sharon was asking about the purple plates. So
Sure.
Are you saying that they protect us from some of the harmful rays that are out there?
No doubt about it. And again, I think Tesla had the notion of trying to produce just that kind of device, but didn't have a lot of time at his disposal. I think that things that happened with respect to Wardenclyffe being betrayed by J.P. Morgan, Westinghouse basically bailing. It was not a good time for him, but he was a pragmatist on a lot of levels, I think. He just kind of accepted circumstances, put out what he could, and, shuffled off when it was time. Whether or not whether that process was expedited by outside forces remains to be determined. We've talked about that before, but neither here nor there, but certainly indicative of what kind of culture still exists with respect to threats to the status quo, as a lot of people know. The plates basically are a means, and what I've envisioned, I've talked to the owner of purpleplates.com, who Tess and I have both known for quite some time, is finding a way of incorporating them, the metamaterials into especially vehicles, personal vehicles, cars, trucks, so forth and so on, in order to be able to mitigate the effects, particularly of electric vehicles, because they produce a significantly larger number of electromagnetic effects than do combustion engine-based technology. And it would be a way of not only immediately offsetting the effects of these increased electromagnetic frequencies, entangled fields, which is the nature of, we are even entangled with our vehicles. I think there's a fair amount of evidence that depending upon our general state, we can affect how well, a vehicle performs. A computer certainly, and there are people out there that do this constantly to any sort of electrical devices. So they, if there's anybody who's listening along, who's familiar with that in their own lives, they'll know what I'm talking about. I'm not saying that I necessarily have a predisposition for it myself, but if we could find a way of incorporating either as the actual materials being used to construct vehicles would have metamaterial properties so they could be far more responsive, would end up transmuting any leakage created by the electricity, the radiation that was being utilized to power any number of different accessories or the vehicle itself in the case of electric vehicles. And a lot of this technology is going to be obsolete in 10 years that is, found in electric vehicles now. I've talked about that before, and it's going to be dramatic in terms of what exactly the technology looks like. I think that it's going to be a lot smaller. I think it's going to require a lot less input. It's probably going to mean that it ends up becoming less expensive, which brings us full circle, that we're not dealing with an economy based upon generation of wealth so much as generation of prosperity, of quality of life, which is not necessarily predicated, although certainly money helps. I'll be the first to admit it. If you know what you want to do with money, it ends up being a huge advantage in terms of having a better life. But what I was starting to say is with the plates, because of the way that they are treated, they end up having an automatic predisposition to transmuting these fields. It's hard to explain the science underlying it, but it has to do with the configuration, specific fields, the resonance strengths, amplitude, these little considerations. And I do have a video which talks very specifically, a couple of different resources. I'm hoping to post some of these resources so that people can read about them on Tessa's site, either on her Facebook page or maybe even here at Spreaker. I don't know what, the accepted practice is, but there is no question that the plates, based on the conversations I've had with customers personally, being as well versed in how they work, talk to a lot of different people. If you look at the testimonials on the site, purpleplates.com, you will see there are definite benefits that have been realized by people that have bought them or been given them as gifts. And they certainly should be incorporated in far more of our day-to-day lives. Vehicles, like I say, we already advise putting them on the backs of smartphones, especially because they generate a very significant amount of leakage and terahertz when 5G does come through as expected, although there is a lawsuit in place, and I don't know if I mentioned this earlier on, by a couple of gentlemen who call themselves the irregulators. Verizon did not have authorization to push this through. There is no legality involved with these acts. In fact, they committed fraud, extortion, in terms of the fact that people who didn't have wireless service, people who have landlines, were the ones that ended up underwriting the costs in billions to advance this technology. And it's illegal. Everything they've done is illegal, and they believe, these two gentlemen believe, that they in fact can end up removing wireless from the conversation entirely, where fiber optics will end up being the primary means of delivering resonant information to power phones, televisions, computers, so forth and so on. It was already being, the plans for it were being laid out when those who were pushing 5G, and again, unfortunately, you've got a situation where Tesla is so closely associated with wireless technology that, it becomes a big selling point amongst people that admire him. I think he certainly would have had very definite second thoughts when he began to realize what kind of effects were occurring. He already had a sense, like I say, the plates themselves are evidence that he understood the dangers involved. There is some good news out there, which is what I really wanted to focus on, since things have been very dark up to this point with respect to the conversation on this show. There is a lot of real progress being made with respect to both vaccine policy and 5G media in general. There is an acknowledgement on the part of some people in Congress that the costs associated with media are bleeding people to death, myself included. A A lot of people cannot be affording $200 a month, and mine is, I'm getting to the point bundled where my provider is, and they're tone deaf as hell. They didn't, when I was dealing strictly with Charter, I've now got Spectrum, and they're basically one and the same. They'll tell you Time Warner's in this mix too. They don't understand that the market cannot bear this, especially those of us who are on very, very fixed incomes, due to our ages and just the general climate out there with respect to deriving income for the purpose of support. There is good news in terms of being able to push back on both fronts. Like I said, you have this lawsuit that's been instigated by the regulators. There is absolutely an acknowledgement, at least in Massachusetts anyways. 7 bills are pending that I'm planning to be able. I've already broached the subject with local legislators. I think there are a lot of states and countries around the world that are saying, no, you're not doing this. Go to hell. And succeeding, especially under the cover of this lawsuit. Because the lawsuit now all of a sudden calls into major question of legality, whether or not it's proven that they are, and I'm telling you it's not legal, but sometimes because justice is not available, for lack of a better term, cases are decided in a way that has nothing to do with it, to do with justice for anyone, except basically perpetuating the dominance by vested interests, by institutions. A lot of places are saying, because they know, they've read the studies are abundantly available. There are people that are warning, knowing, as I alluded, a gentleman of, I believe, lower Scottish extraction by the name of Mark Steele. I don't know if any of you have seen him. He's been on a number of different, fairly hyperbolic, for lack of a better term, sensational, whatever, but the information contained, a lot of it is very, very valid, and there are a lot of credible people speaking about it. He has been very much speaking out because he was involved with the development of some of this technology, and he knows what it's capable of. The word smart is directly associated with dark ops, very, very deep military projects, DARPA, so forth and so on. SMART is an acronym, and the M does stand indeed for military. So this technology, 5G, is going to allow for things that if more people were aware, and you're always at a point where you're risking being called a conspiracy theorist, as Tessa says at the outset, pull up those tinfoil hats. The things that 5G are capable of doing is surveillance on a scale unimaginable even 30 years ago. One of the things that I did not know before now is that LED bulbs have the capability of being recognized by certain types of technology. There is a lens inside every LED bulb, supposedly, which is not a comforting thought, as you can imagine, because LEDs now are pretty much the rule of thumb. Incandescent having been eliminated completely, CFLs being toxic from the outset. Hated those things. I knew they were bad news. But there is the ability, as a result of chemtrails, because of the aluminum, because of the metals that had been seeded in the atmosphere, there are 20,000 satellites scheduled to be put into Earth orbit as a result of HAARP and 5G.
Wow. That
would end up acting as a communications net that would very possibly have military applications of a nature not yet determined because it's top secret, classified. There would be on the order of, I forget how many million small cell units all over the planet that have been demonstrated to be far more toxic than anything else ever the ecosystem has ever been exposed to. Grass dying within minutes of one being installed. Worst of all, though, and this is something to which he alludes, I'm certainly aware of it, having a very good knowledge with respect to what's known as pleomorphism, where organisms can be exposed to various stimuli. They change into different organisms. I've talked, I think, at least at once before with respect to the Russian Peter Garyev's experiments, whereby he transformed just as a result of introducing fairly weak, gentle laser values through a salamander's embryo into a frog's and turn the frog into a salamander. I'm not exaggerating. This is what is possible. So, with that in mind, and Steele certainly alluded to it without necessarily specifying it, just by virtue of introducing certain resonant values, certain microwave terahertz lengths, you can, in fact, end up changing what are normally friendly bacteria, viruses, which do not pose a threat normally to life, humans, so forth and so on, into a mortal threat. And that is a very distinct possibility as to what has happened in China, Wuhan. There's been talk by him about the degeneration of society. People are fighting for food. The air quality is god-awful, one of the worst places on the planet. It was one of the first places on Earth where 5G was rolled out to an extent that it was ubiquitous, for lack of a better term. And again, talking about these effects, it begins to make some sense that the possibility exists. They are especially vulnerable as a result of their immune systems being suitably weakened. Whether or not they were guinea pigs is hard to say, but I definitely will tell you we are being tested on. It's no longer even remotely a wild theory. It's real. The evidence is emerging quickly, and it's not being talked about a whole lot because, again, you're dealing with that backlash. And funnily enough, there was a biological weapons research laboratory in Wuhan. In fact, the Chinese Prime Minister alluded to the possibility, although also he, more or less turned the blame back on the United States, that there might have been some commingling that went on with samples from that bioterrorism or biomilitary research lab in Wuhan and the citizens outside. Probably, quite possibly, exacerbated by the terahertz wavelengths of 5G. It is a perfect storm by any reasonable measure, and it is deadly on a scale that I can't even begin to communicate. The ecosystem is under attack, and by people who really don't understand what they're doing, in my estimation. I would like to believe that there is some sort of really advanced knowledge underscoring these attempts, that HAARP had some role in terms of being able to stabilize climate, especially with knowledge of the Earth's electromagnetic field declining, that the thickening had some purpose in terms of stabilizing or preventing the decline of life on Earth because there was going to be a problem, maybe even related as a result of the CIA's knowledge as to the possibility of a cataclysmic crustal displacement due to cosmic rays being introduced into the Earth's electromagnetic field. I can't say to you I'm confident about that because they don't demonstrate evidence of having that level of conscientiousness or insight. Not many people that are in power right now are, really. I can't point to one person and say, well, they have a handle on things. They know what's happening. They understand. They see the full picture. And that scares me more than anything else because there's nobody that's going to say, wait a minute, shouldn't we be? We're the ones that are saying it. You and I know. We understand. We may not necessarily understand every aspect, but we know instinctively where information is being communicated to us that something is really wrong and that it's not being recognized. That's why I'm here, because if at my age, I don't know how much time I have to be able to communicate what I've recognized. This is of incredible importance. I'm pushing hard to be able to get testing with respect to vaccines because as I've said on the two shows previous, I have personally identified what I believe to be the underlying pathology which has produced that hypersensitization since 1989. Combination of two elements that or two compounds that should never have been combined to begin with. And any real scientist would have recognized that because it's common knowledge to metallurgists. You do not combine aluminum in any form and stainless steel. It's one of the most corrosive synergistic effects known to man. And yet they did in the vaccines. Repeatedly, again and again and again. Is it any wonder that people are crippled? Is it any wonder that there is an autism rate that is now approaching 1 in 2 as of 2050 projected? I mean, this is insanity on a scale that I never as a child could have ever imagined. I think about it and I'm blown away by the failure, by the lack of an instinct for people to say, wait a minute, hold on, what are we doing here? And this testing hopefully will demonstrate, among other things, that we have indeed, our genomes have been compromised as a species, and that this dictates that more and more insights into how the immune system responds with non-invasive approaches ends up beginning to bring the curtain down on conventional medicine that hijacked the better approach, as I say, almost 100 years ago when the AMA basically stepped in and said, mine. They saw the money, they saw the billions and trillions that would be available if they could convince people they needed their products more than ever as the population began to expand to unprecedented levels. This has all got to change, or it's not going to end well. Every instinct I have tells me that we are in for a hellish time unless we basically we're capable of getting through to these elected officials, the people that have the ability and the resources, the financial resources that are not co-opted by the interests, the pharmaceutical industry, the insurance industry, the hospital complexes, the American Medical Association. You know, they're all, as Tessa said, our Congress does not represent us first and foremost. They represent a lot of other people, and they don't communicate with us. We're in a situation now, and this is a problem that I have in general with 21st century society, where people we don't even know have the ability to make decisions that will have a profound impact on our lives. And we can't even communicate our opposition anymore in terms of without going through a lot of grief. You can't email people that aren't representing you in Congress any longer, or if you do, you're using a platform that does not allow you to do bulk emailing. You have to do an awful lot of work. You can certainly copy and paste, you know, with respect to these interfaces that are they're all developed in order to be able, ostensibly, to prevent infections, computer infections, compromises of valuable information, security, so forth and so on, identity theft. I understand that. But at the same time, it's created a situation where government is no longer functioning as anything remotely resembling a democracy. A democracy is not something that ends up allowing for people to make decisions and not have any power for those people being affected to prevent things that may not be good for them in the long run. And it's disingenuous to say this is a democracy. I'm not even sure that a democracy is the right model, and we are supposed to be, quote unquote, a democratic republic for some of these very reasons, having to do with the ability to affect people's lives without their consent. And that's what it comes down to, is consent. No one has the right to tell you how you're going to treat your health, especially if what they're trying to sell you stands to jeopardize it to such an extent that you may be obligated and not have the resources. Billions and billions of dollars have to be spent as a result of vaccine injuries, cripplings, and the number is going to be quintuple with respect to exposures of terahertz frequency microwave lengths. It's really that simple. The evidence is abundant. It's not contestable. There are books, certainly the books written by the irregulators, a book written by the irregulators called A Broken Promise. There is a book by Dr. Alan Palmer with respect to vaccines called The Truth Will Prevail. Both of those are available free as PDFs. I can certainly give links to that on Tessa's Facebook page if that's how we decide to provide the resources. There is so much evidence out there that there needs to be a different approach to the way that we protect our health, protect our lives, that is not being heard by a large percentage still. There's an improvement. There are people that are starting to ask the questions in positions to change these circumstances. Elected officials at both state and federal, less at federal by far than state. Unfortunately, the states are going to be the ones that determine how this goes. And if the feds try to step in, there's law that will prevent them from doing it. but it's going to be a long, bloody, drawn-out process. This is a fight, and I still don't feel good about where we're at. Even if we have the win, the power still rests in their hands if they're not going to recognize our rights. And I don't know what to say to you to say, okay, well, life's going to get better. I don't know. I wish I could tell you that it was, but I have to do what I can to be a source of information so that people respond in a way that they're capable of responding in an informed way to proceed within the context of their own lives, to know what they need to look out for. And I guess that really, there isn't much more that can be said. We have a lot of threats hanging over our heads right now, and it is easy to feel powerless. It's easy to feel extraordinarily alone. The nature of this is not something that is conducive to having much of a social life, as much as I'm on social media talking right now. Some of you know that. Some of you have friends where they tune you out the minute you start talking about anything that's not familiar to them. And I don't have a good answer. You know, these are not necessarily things that I say have to be sacrificed, but it is what it is. And hopefully that changes. Hopefully people really begin to start valuing the right things again. Recognize when there are people that are trying to do something good, to try to change things for the better in their lives and those that matter most to them. I can't say it loudly enough, but you're also not going to be able to count on that either. And that's the truth.
It really is. But I think together, you know, we have a voice, and it just is going to take more of us. And like you said, people just tune it out. There's so much on all of our plates, and the way our life is, you know, we're working generally more than one job. You have no time for your family, or like you said, anything of moral value or whatnot that makes your life better, makes you happy. And it's kind of a way to keep us down, I think, and to keep us from paying attention to what's really going on.
One thing I wanted to add for what it's worth, and this has just occurred to me, probably not novel by any means. Other people may have, seized upon the terminology. I think that we have to change the nature of our relationship with government, with the economy, not to being producers, but to being contributors, and that there be opportunities to contribute that are valued equally as much as things that are viewed as quote-unquote work. Because I think that, and I've talked about this before, the simple fact of the matter is that a lot of markets are vanishing, and they're not going to be replaced. There is not going to be any significant growth out of this. There will be ways of mitigating the changes to our lives. One thing I've talked about before is industrial hemp in terms of the transition out of extracted petrochemicals as a basis for any number of different products, certainly petroleum for gasoline and oil, but utilizing hemp instead to be able to produce various types of polymers, possibly edible materials. This is going to certainly be something that helps give a sense of very definite purpose to people's lives who may have lost them as a result of these markets vanishing. People are not purchasing material goods the way they used to, and that means that there's not the opportunities to create jobs which can be consistently supported. It's a very, very slippery slope at a time when the cost of everything, rent, mortgages, this is not sustainable. As I said earlier, I know firsthand. I have my anxieties about my own circumstances, and there's no easy way. I'm not in a position where I can work two jobs for a variety of different reasons. I want to be doing more to address these things. I want to be given the resources to change these circumstances, that people can be free, that they have the technology at their disposal to take care of themselves as they see fit, to be able to provide their own power, ability to run various devices, that they're not beholden to the utility companies, at least not to the extent that they are now, that they have the ability to generate. And there is technology certainly that is right on the horizon. Does already exist, but has not been commercialized, that exists which would allow us to be able to do just that with very little input. The cost is so minuscule, if at all. But again, you're threatening giants that are deriving billions of dollars annually from this need. And do they have the ability to step away and say, okay, well, we've made our fortune. You know, we have absolutely benefited and we're grateful, and we're going to demonstrate that gratitude by letting you go, by giving you the means so you can get on with your life, because we've had a good one as a result of the need you had of our products, of our services. I don't know whether or not we start seeing more of that. I'm not optimistic, because I don't think that the state of human evolution has improved enough for it to happen, at least not at this moment in time. But the key with respect to finding ways of people being able to support themselves, do we end up taking more of an active role in government? Do we get compensated for the work we do for people that are supposed to represent us? It's an odd relationship. I understand that. It feels weird to me too. But it certainly is something where there are services provided. We, in Massachusetts, with respect to the vaccine bills, we're doing enormous amounts of information outreach to these legislators. They don't know anything, the vast majority of them, especially the people sponsoring these bills, but you can't talk to them anyways. They're young. They think they know everything. They don't think at all, for that matter, most of them. And we should be compensated in some way that we have an easier life. No one should have to suffer. No one should have to sacrifice so much of their life that it doesn't have any meaning any longer. The sacrifice may have meaning, but there's nothing else. This is not the way to live. This is not the way we have to live with the technological state of affairs that exists right now. The technology exists. The question is whether or not it's going to be open sourced in a way so that we can get on with our lives, that we can begin to be doing things and have the ability to make decisions, say, okay, I want to do this. I don't need to do this. I don't have to do this. It's okay if I don't want to do this, or it's okay I want to do this. If I want to jump out of a plane, if I want to scale a mountain, if I want to cliff dive, that's fine. Have at it. I don't care. It makes no difference to me. I really don't care. That's not something that I'm concerned about. But other people certainly have the need, and if at least they have the ability to make the decision in an informed way, if there isn't an expectation, a tacit suggestion that their life is not going to have as much value as a result of not pushing the envelope as someone else sees fit. This is the kind of climate we're living in. It is affecting relationships profoundly, and that's a whole nother topic, which I don't even want to get into. I will say that in my lifetime, I have seen the quality of relationships deteriorate dramatically, and a lot of them have failed because of expectations. And I deal with it, and I can't, there's not a lot I can do about it, really, to speak of. And we all have our preferences. We all have some expectations, but the expectations have to be realistic. We have to be willing to accept other aspects of other people's lives if we really have a desire to have them in ours. I don't know how else to put it. It's a very difficult time to be alive for a lot of us, and it's frustrating when people basically end up just defaulting to the old, oh, life is good trope. Well, life may be good for you, and that's great. I don't begrudge you, but it's not for a lot of other people, and you need to be sensitive to that, because the less that you're sensitive to it, the more frustrated, the more that they feel like there's no hope. And it's not a good situation. If someone has integrity, has compassion, empathy, they don't want to be in a position where they're not aware, cognizant of how other people are being affected by decisions being made, even if it's not by them in some instances. That's certainly true of me. I don't end up taking the full responsibility, but I certainly feel it. And I don't know how much all of you are affected by these things, how much you feel frustrated when you see something, an injustice perpetrated on someone, regardless of the circumstances, how they're affected, how they feel as a result of it. And sometimes it may be because of things that occurred in their past that they're responding and being affected that the way that they are. That's another conversation as well. But the point I'm making more than anything else is people don't have to suffer the way that we are. There's no reason for it. Really, there's just no reason why we should have to suffer when we have the ability to produce resources for our benefit, not for other people's benefit, not to line the pockets of people even more than they already are lined, to swell revenue streams to the point where they're flooding others' lives. They're drowning other people's lives in their prosperity, if that makes any sense. It's okay to have money. It's okay to be relatively, a certain amount of opulence. The problem is when other people do without, and it's through no fault of their own, because there is the level of control of access to resources, that there is the level of control to participation in society, even without consideration of these particular, only word I can use is perquisites, that are prized by certain people, and somewhat understandably so. So I don't know what other questions any of you have. I feel like I've covered most of what I wanted to say. If there's something that I've overlooked, you may be aware of it. Tessa, I don't know if you have anything to add to this. I know we're coming up on 10 of 12 Eastern, so I figured I'd check in and kind of give an opportunity to wind things down.
Well, Christopher was asking and also stating, I have a permanent neurosurgical condition that is genetic. Will these waves make me sick in a closed space like a train? So I guess he's wondering about the different rays that are going on.
Christopher, all I can say is it's a distinct possibility. I wish I could tell you otherwise, but it is a distinct possibility. Knowing more about your particular I'm presuming there's a certain amount of degeneration that's occurred. If I knew a little bit more, I could say with more certitude, but I can say there's definitely a higher risk to people that have predispositions to atypical neurological responses. And that is in no way should be looked upon as a stigmatization. I can't clarify that enough. Life is scary. A lot of us have post-traumatic stress disorder because of the way we live, because of the way we've been treated by our society. It's not something to be, and I'm not suggesting you are, but anybody else, not something to feel self-conscious about, certainly not ashamed. And the problem is that the inability of a lot of people to recognize the validity of how you're affected, like I said just a few minutes ago, makes it difficult for them to be able to communicate with you in a meaningful way, and it's got to be frustrating.
And we were talking about purple plates as well, and different things that protects against, and I never thought about putting that with my cell phone in my pocket. So I think that would be a good way to protect yourself from those certain rays. Do you also own a purple plate?
Oh, absolutely. Knowing the owner as long as I have, it was inevitable. Plus, in terms of talking to people about them, I have a few different types. I have a large plate under my pillow. I have had one for 10 years. I definitely will tell you, I think it has minimized the level of stress that I've been exposed to, and it's been considerable most of my life, and the last 10 years, no exception at all. Possibly some of the worst. But I think I've weathered it well in combination with, availing myself of my homeopath, various types of different supplements, homeopathic preparations. The combination of these things have certainly done a lot to be able to maintain my health, relatively speaking. I've had some serious problems because of the stress involved, but I do swear by the plates. I think they're definitely capable of being able to support even the FDA without necessarily acknowledging them specifically. Does indicate, has since said that they do believe there is value in terms of immune system support. Now, whether or not that's a bone they're throwing is hard to say, but at least from a legal standpoint, and I've always said there are no specific health claims being made, so it's impossible to end up banning anything along these lines because it is subjective. Each person may be affected differently by the plates. Certain parts of their health problems may improve as a result. Certainly Christopher would be, I think it would be good if he could get one, if he doesn't already have one, to have, if he's traveling on a train where there's going to be 5G or exposure, prolonged, significant exposure to 5G, terahertz, even any microwaves really to speak of. there's going to be the risk of leakage from various devices, appliances, so forth and so on. And so, yes, what I'm suggesting is something of, and I use this term very colloquially, incorporating them into day-to-day items that you're going to have a significant field generated by them, such as electric vehicles. That's a quantum leap. That's a change in thinking, and you begin to understand how certain materials, without being directly introduced, ingested, for lack of a better term, or injected, can have such profound effects and not have the ones you don't want. There are no side effects really to speak of with things like metamaterials. They're not being put into the body. The ions that are being transferred, communicated from, an example, the plates or any metamaterial that is interacting with a field, are going directly to the field, and then the information, the resonant information, is being communicated in turn in a way that allows for the reconciliation to be with far less difficulty, far less trauma, stress. It's just a much more benign way of receiving information that can correct something that needs to be corrected. In terms of field reconfiguration, which is the most benign thing, but again very critical in terms of overall health at the end of the day, not understood by conventional medicine at all. Some complementary practitioners understand the value of it, but it also does definitely affect the physical body. It's inevitable, because resonant information is at the root of everything. There is nothing that isn't affected by it. And our very existence can be attributed to resonant informational effects, the successful reconciliation of those effects within an existing system, that it isn't threatened by the introduction of them. Simple. It's that simple. Really, that's what determines existence.
Skywatcher is wondering.
What's that?
Skywatcher is wondering. Are you saying that 5G was in a terahertz range?
It is, absolutely. Very, very lethal wavelength, without a doubt. It's been demonstrated in numerous studies. They're very easy to access. I'm going to try to provide some as a resource at some point within the next couple of days that people can read. The videos, again, it is a litany of bad news with respect to exposure, particularly to terahertz waves and, by extension, 5G. It ends up accelerating the decline of life on Earth fast.
Yeah, I haven't heard very many positive things about it. And going back to the purple plate, I own one as well, and I've seen amazing effects from it. I get a boost in energy. I have some sort of drive going on instead of feeling just tapped out. And I've seen that you can also use it like under your plants, under your pet's water, so on and so forth. With stones and crystals and such, you have to do certain things to cleanse them. Is there anything that you have to do to cleanse the purple plate?
Not at all. Not at all. And again, with crystals, the issue largely is as a result of the entanglement being maintained for long periods of time. That's why you would need, you're getting into psychometry too, getting a little bit more into the existential aspects. That information which is contained within the field as a result of being communicated from another field that becomes entangled with it remains. Whereas with the plates, you can take the plate from one person to another, and the plate will automatically end up calibrating, communicating the information based on that person's aggregate field, which is why they're so amazing. They really do make friends quickly, and they do it in a way that is just very... Some people extremely sensitive to changes in electromagnetic field values are going to end up reacting. I've seen it happen once or twice myself. It's nothing to be scared of by any means. It's just a little disorienting because they are as sensitive as they are. But as I tell customers, basically, the only way you can end up eliminating the effects of the plates is either by changing the surface area, the amount of surface area, cutting them in half. You're creating two separate fields as a result of that. Entangle, make no mistake, but they're no longer a singular aggregate field. Or, of course, melting them down entirely, in which case it all goes away. The matrix is gone. It's gone. But most people aren't going to be inclined to do that. There's no real likelihood of that happening. They don't end up, because of the fact they've been reconfigured in a very specific way. The molecular reconfiguration does not go away at all. It's forever. And that's what makes it a material.
And they've also come out recently. I saw Corrine advertising it reminds me of a pocket portal. It's round and it's yellow and it looks a lot like the pocket portal or pocket vortex, I believe it's called, which you can do the taller, shorter experiment with. Have you seen these? And do you know what effects these have?
I have seen them. I haven't seen them in person. I haven't actually held them yet, but through very meticulous trial and error, the difference being, and I don't know that she's going to end up expanding them into the larger sizes. This is the trade-off. So the purple plates still have great value, and a lot of people take a lot of comfort from the whole color purple, the association of the color purple with divinity and healing. But what are known as the auric illumination discs have been calibrated in such a way that they have the greatest range of resonant response, to my way of thinking, available on the planet. I'm not exaggerating when I say that. They are remarkable devices in terms of what has been determined by their kinesiological response. They basically are extremely valuable talismans, and they're extremely affordable too. Same price as the large discs, purple plates discs, but they have just a little bit more juice. They've got they're a lot more, a wider range, but not by a lot more, but enough to be significant. That's the difference. And I won't go into the reasons why she ended up developing these, but I know enough about the underlying science. And again, kinesiology ends up revealing a lot. It simply is a way of determining how the configuration of fields are affected by introduction of new information. Same theme all over again. The auric illumination discs are just remarkable devices. Plates as well, but the auric illumination discs are an improvement upon the plates in terms of the technology. What that means in the long term, hard to say. A large plate, a small plate produces a larger field than a disc, in terms of the extent of the effect. But when you're talking about a talisman, you're talking about something you're wearing around your neck, putting on the back of your phone, carrying in your pocket, the auric illumination disc is the most sophisticated available.
It's pretty amazing.
The
advancement of, from this rectangular sort of structure to something round, and a lot of times just the shape has a lot to do with how the energy comes out of it and what things it's able to do. So it's awesome, the advancement that she's doing, and I wish her the best of luck on that. And as soon as I get enough money, I'm definitely going to purchase one. But you can check it out, like James had said earlier, on purpleplates.com. And we are at the end of our second hour, James. I believe you said you had to go before the third hour?
Just to I always appreciate the opportunity to be on for a bit, but the third hour, the 3 hours, is a bit of a stretch for me under the best of circumstances, and I appreciate those listening understanding that. I hope I have been, the information I provided hasn't been too traumatizing, has been of value. Again, if there are any subsequent questions, please feel free to ask. I'll do my best to answer, and I think those resources will really clarify a lot of what it was I talked about tonight in terms of the specific threats involved and some of the progress. Again, the link to the Irregulators lawsuit against Verizon and trying to stop the rollout of 5G. Some of the things with respect to vaccines, the threats as far as cataclysmic changes to the Earth's attitude, for lack of a better term. Crustal displacement is a pretty strong set of words itself. But as much as I can be a resource to you, and strike a balance, I do want to. In this instance, especially, these resources will be available, I would think, again, on Tessa's Facebook page. I hope you all have a good night. Rest well, and thanks again for letting me talk a bit.
And how can our listeners find you if they do have more questions or things they'd like to discuss with you along the lines of the many amazing topics that we touched on this evening?
Oh, real quick, that brings up something else I was going to mention, and I haven't even really suggested it to followers. I've had a page on Facebook for 8 years, as of last January 1st of New Year's 2020, called the Human Internet Radio Project. And unfortunately, in an attempt to try to strike that better balance, also just being in a position where it's more and more difficult as time wears on to provide new content, I feel I'm repeating myself a lot of the time. I'm looking at the strong possibility of starting a podcast before the end of the year for the Human Internet Radio Project, probably be about once a month, where I am talking about a lot of the developments, because I expect there are going to be fairly new things coming down the pike before 2021 arrives. You can certainly contact me there. Like the page, that would be great. Really appreciate it if you do. Otherwise, if it's okay with Tessa, the thread that ends up being created with the resources, just sound me, put your questions in there if you're on Facebook, and just let Tessa know. She certainly can get in touch with me without too much of a problem. So, that probably would be the best course of action, I think. And I can get back in touch fairly fast, all things being equal, within a couple of days at most.
Well, thank you again, James, for being on the show tonight. And like he said, you can find him under James Moses on Facebook there. But yes, thank you again for coming on and just going over all this with us. It's been a very interesting and scary discussion.
Yep, I can't deny that. Thanks, Tessa. Again, everybody sleep well when you get to bed.
Good night, James.
Night.
And on that note, we're going to go to our second musical break, and we have Hosni Bronx on, and Hosni comes from Jamaica and also spends much of his time in the Bronx of New York. And an interesting fact, he's got several band members in his band that are original members of Bob Marley's band, Bob Marley and the Wailers. So here we go with Hosni Bronx with Free Child as well as Strong Life. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back right after this musical break.
Who decided this life for me? Babylon make you suffer. What is desire? Young life. We are ready to fight. Hard life for my people. I don't know why my people live this life. I don't know why my people live this life. I don't know how to fight, 'cause my people suffer. What do you want, Babylon? I don't understand why this world is so strange, strange with my people. I don't know how to fight, but if we are together, it will work. It will work. Babylon no have no heart. 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 My people, you have to survive. Yeah, you must rebuild you and make your own way. You must not give up. The beginning of the revolt will start. We need to follow our true destiny. Whoa, whoa, yeah, 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 yeah. I don't know why my people live this life. I don't know why my people live this life. The obstacle we face, yeah, is Babylon. The world is a good place, yeah, for our freedom. You take everything, you don't breathe anything, yeah, yeah. Young life, all anti-dread. We must believe in a magical, powerful force that unite us, and not just these people stay speechless again. We don't want to talk, no, it's time to fight, yeah. We stop talking. Babylon make you suffer. 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 What is desire? Young life. We are ready to fight.
Welcome back, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us tonight. Tonight we had James Moses on with, so many different crazy things that are going on in this world. So we have the last third hour free and open, and we decided we're just going to start the after party early. So right now we are joined by Mighty Man, Mr. Christopher Wayne Fisher. We have Miss Sandra Heath from, I believe it's Vancouver, British Columbia, correct?
Vancouver Island, Victoria, BC.
Wow. And then we have Jim Morris from Scotland. You guys, welcome, and thanks so much for coming in and hanging out with us for the third hour and getting the after party started early.
No problem.
So did you guys have any thoughts on the discussion we had tonight? Anything that you would like to add from anything that you had heard going on during this conversation for the last 2 hours?
The anti-vax stuff, I felt really uncomfortable.
Yeah, I agree. Here in the UK, if you're 60 years and over, or you have health problems, you get a free flu jab. I've never had one, and that thing almost killed my sister. She swore blind she would never get another one. So you don't know what they're injecting into you. I mean, it's only valid if you come down with last year's influenza. It mutates every year. It's a completely different virus. So then the vaccination you're getting is absolutely no effect on this year's flu. It wouldn't do anything at all. If anything, it'll only make you sick. You do wonder about that, but the number of aging population, as they keep telling us in the UK, and the Georgia Guidestones, nothing would surprise me,
The jab has helped me from getting sick. So I keep getting it every year. It works well for me.
Well, I've got a few family members that have to get it due to certain issues with their immune system. My sister being one, my brother-in-law being another, and he was even saying, like, never again will I do that. Like, I don't care what they say, I'm not getting that vaccination again. And when I took the kids in on Friday to get checked out for whatever virus they have, we don't know. It's not the flu, it's not strep throat, it's something viral. She's like, did you guys get the flu vaccine this year? And I said, no, we didn't. And, we're almost out of the woods as far as that goes. But it makes you wonder, are all these people that are getting this vaccination, are they actually the ones that are really harshly being affected by this virus? And it's a large number of people. I think last I saw it was like 2,600 had passed from the virus so far, the flu virus. And like you said, it mutates and it's something different every year. How do you know if this vaccination is going to work and what exactly is in the cocktail that they're putting inside you?
Yeah, there's a Swiss-Austrian companies working together have developed an RFD chip so small it can go through the eye of a needle. So you might object to having an RFD chip on your body or whatever, but they can do that, they can put that in without your knowledge. And I mean, if you're going to hospital, you're seriously ill, you've got no idea what they start injecting you with. I don't want to get down the kind of horror story thing. But when they're starting talking about putting RFDs into a vaccination that can go through the eye of a needle, I mean, you don't know what they're going to do next, really.
Yeah, and I was disappointed because, like I said, on break, they tested for the flu, they tested for strep, and I told her I had just gotten a notification from the school that said parvovirus has been found in our school system. It's not in the same school as my kids, but my daughter brought up the fact, hey, we ride buses, and who knows how quickly it's spreading. And the doctor wouldn't even test for that because she didn't have the red rash on the face that comes along with it, but that's not until well into a week into this virus. But it's definitely viral because there's no fever. Were it bacterial, she would have a fever, or they would.
My neighbour next door, he came down very, very ill. Took him to the hospital, did blood tests on him, and he'd actually contracted a bacterial virus and the other type of virus, which was unheard of. And the lab sent him a letter saying, congratulations, that's the first time I've ever experienced anything like that. To have both types of virus and whatever it was in your system at the same time.
Wow.
And Bill reckoned what happened was they come back in, drying the dog. And the dog sneezed all over him twice. Of course, he said that's just what happens. But he thinks that's how he contracted these, with the dog sneezing on them. And the parvovirus was only supposed to affect animals. But
that's what I thought.
Yeah, but we know
it's been around a long time. It used to be called fifth disease.
Yeah.
But 5 years ago, they finally decided to test what virus it came from. It came from parvovirus. And meclizine don't work to cure the nausea. You need to get something like Tygan if you're having nausea from it.
Yeah, the thing is that we know that viruses and diseases can be spread from animals to humans, so that's what they think what happened there with Bill.
Yeah, I had fifth disease before. It wasn't pleasant. I had what her Tessa's. I had it before. It's not fun.
Yeah, it seems like the younger kids have gotten through it within a few days. There's still the residual cough and, things with the wanting to eat something. It's hard to find something that they want to eat. But with Nova, like I even got her ice so she could suck on the ice and not be ingesting the water too quickly. And that's not even working. She can't keep anything down. And she's so hungry, and the doctor even told her, she's like, well, you could go a while without eating, but make sure you're drinking water, but she can't. And I told her, just keep doing it, even though you're throwing it up, you're absorbing some of it, and just try to keep ingesting water and ice or whatever you can in order to be able to absorb some of that water so you don't get dehydrated, which is what we're trying not to have happen.
Yeah, if you're concerned about it, ask her about haloperidol or T-gon.
Yeah, like I said, if by tomorrow it hasn't worked its way out, we're going to do a same-day appointment and get her in here in the Bayfield office because I wasn't very happy with my service at the main office. I mean, all she had to do was another swab to see if indeed she had that, but that's just asking too much,
Yeah, because it causes the nausea through the nervous system, parvo does, and the typical anti-nausea work through the vagal nerve system, which is different. Parvo affects the brain like the flu does.
And I've heard all these different stories about, the general vaccinations that our kids get and how it causes autism. The only ill effect that my kids have had with vaccinations is Nova. Unfortunately, I listened to not only my friend who's got autistic kids and is anti-vaccination, and also her doctor, Dr. Zemak at the time, said, well, if you want to wait a little bit, we can give her this pertussis vaccination a little later. She doesn't really need it right now. And then she ended up getting pertussis, aka whooping cough, and her immune system has just been destroyed. Anything that comes around, she not only gets it, but she gets it 10 times worse. So that's the only regret I have as far as vaccinations is I didn't give her that one like I had my child prior and all my children after due to that experience. Had I just given that to her, she wouldn't be waking up every morning crying, and I wish I just had a normal life and I could have a normal morning. Every morning she's sick, but this is just out of hand, this new virus that's going on. Pretty scary. And it makes me wonder, okay, so this flu that's here this year is very hardcore. And then we have the coronavirus, which resonates in a place where a lot of our things are shipped from. Makes you wonder about that. Also, people that have gotten it that are here in the United States, I believe it's now in Arizona, which is in the Four Corners area. So it's pretty close to where I'm at. And I'm kind of freaking out about it.
They got the first case up where Nikki is as of yesterday. Because I help her with research. I use the health department website a lot, and they just confirmed the first cases last week. Washington State. It's in like 5 states now.
But the numbers for this coronavirus, what were you saying the numbers were as of today? Jim, I believe it was you that was talking about that.
908. That's 97 new deaths. But they're claiming it's stabilized. I don't know about that. But the thing is, I don't know if you've got the disinfectant in the States called Dettol. We've got it here in the UK, and on the back of the bottle, it gives you a list of all the bugs that it kills. And one of them is the coronavirus. Now, they've known about this virus for years. And now they tell you they're trying to produce a vaccine for it. I would have thought if you've known about a virus that's a potential hazard, you would have developed a vaccine for it more or less on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
Something didn't add up there. You know, a bottle of Dettol's been in sale in Britain for since I was a kid or longer. And there's the list on the back. It was actually my cousin sent me. He's in Vancouver Island, like Sandra. It was him that sent me. He says, look at this. This is the back of a bottle of Dettol. And there it is, coronavirus. So they've known about it. So what's it, you know, they're just letting this thing run. I'm sure that's what they're doing.
That's all you do with a virus infection, just let it run its course, and there's really not a lot you can do.
And it seems like it's halted a lot of things going on over there in China to the point where gas is now cheaper here. You would think the more gas they sold over there, the cheaper it would be over here, but they're not selling over there because nobody's going anywhere. Everybody's kind of quarantined themselves. They don't want to get it. So now it's cheaper for some reason, which does not make any sense to me at all. How does that even work out?
It don't. I don't get it.
The car manufacturing industry in Britain has been hit by it because a lot of the spare parts for all the makes of cars that's on the road are actually made in China. So the imports of spare parts is dropping. They're only taking them from certain areas now. But that's just one aspect of it. It's, if you think it isn't going to affect the commercial side, it's already started to affect it because the sales in cars were going down in the UK, and this has hit it even harder. So there's an awful lot of people employed in the manufacturing industry in the UK, and UK new sales in January down 7% year on year. So their sales are dropped even more since this coronavirus has arrived.
Yeah, it's going to wreck the economy. I'm concerned about yours, Jim, because they have no stable agreements yet since you left the EU.
Yeah.
The longer Mr. Johnson waits, it's going to cause unrest.
Yeah, well, it's already started. He's been pressured to make sure he secured trade agreements with Canada, Australia, and New Zealand.
And the US.
And the US. But there again, he's not going to... it's this 5G carry on that seems to be the hold-up. There was something there on the news about that. Britain says it will only be limited usage and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, especially young folks, some new gadget comes out, you know, that's faster and better and everything else. So, you know, they'll be getting them for their iPads and iPods and everything else. I don't trust those things. The only time I ever use my mobile phone is if I'm over in town and I need to get a cab back. I don't drive. And I need to get back because I've missed the bus. That's the only time I ever use it. I never use it other than that. But they've got their heads glued to these things, babbling away there all the time, and they emit radiation.
Or in your pocket, you know. Where else do you carry it but your pocket? I know some girls that put it in their bra. These are not good places to keep it. So that's where when James was talking about the purple plates and how you put it against the phone and it keeps you from getting those waves from your phone. And I never even thought of that. I'm like, that's a really good idea. I'm just afraid if I put them together that when I pull my cell phone out, like my driver's license that was lost in New Orleans, my purple plate's going to fall. But at least you'd hear the tink or something, hopefully, depending on where you're at the moment. But it's a cool idea to try that.
Yeah, I'm going to look up and see if I can find out where these purple plates are. They'll probably have to come from the States, I would think.
Yeah, it's purpleplates.com, and Corinne DeWinter is the one that has that site.
Right, I'm going to go and check that now. Let me see. We'll open up a new window. Right, I'll be back in a tick.
Yeah, and they said that someone in the chat room said that this new device, and I can't remember the name that James called it, but it's like 56 times stronger. Let me see if I can find it, than the original purple plate. And I was talking about the shape of it. So the original shape is rectangular-ish, and it's pretty thin, and it's got this really cool design, like stamp on it, or carving, whatever you want to call it, which I don't know what it means. Maybe it's an insignia of the person that created it. But having it, and like I said, it reminds me of the Pocket Vortex. It's a little round yellow disc, and he said she's now making them bigger, but this circular pattern actually has a lot of power within it in ways of it dispersing, so I could see how that could be better than the original purple plate. No longer purple, but now golden.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I have the chance, I'll get the golden version, see how that affects things. I got the purple one.
We can actually get them here, Tessa, on Amazon UK.
Nice.
And
the
it's
last
a right
price I saw was like $14.99. What's it going for over there?
£39.99.
Oh my goodness.
So that's over $40 plus $3.50 shipping.
Yeah, that's probably part of it because of the shipping to you, and probably the shipping of the commercial, probably the wholesale to your retail in your country in the year. It's probably like $40.
Yeah, I got them in different sizes.
It's like you have to pay almost $1 million for shipping.
Well, and even though it's that much over there, I think it really is worth it to get one and try it. And a lot of times, Corrine on her show or on her site will do, she'll give out free ones. Like she's done that on our show before. My sister actually had received one from her as a gift, but it's really amazing what it does. I found for me personally, having it in my pocket, which I've had it in my jacket for a while, but it's now in my back pocket again. But it helped me to have like that extra boost of energy that I needed to get certain things done during the day.
Yeah, I was thinking about putting one under the pillow at night because I've got chronic fatigue syndrome. So if it's going to help stabilize the sleep pattern, you try it and see if that's the way it's got to be. You just have to try and see if it works. But certainly, from what I've heard, there is benefits to it. So any benefit at all is good going. The cheapest is a small one, small disc. And that's £27, which is about $30, $3.50 postage. But it doesn't say whether it's coming from the UK or whether they've got it in the stores. Amazon's one of the biggest companies in Britain now. They've got a major warehouse in just about every town and city in Britain. A big employer. Let's see, I'm just going to click on this, Tessa, and see where it's coming from.
Yeah, it'll tell you the chain of custody where the product is made and how it's shipped to you. Amazon's good about that.
So is there, Chris, do you have a purple plate, or was it you, Sandra, that said you had one? I know somebody else within the group has one. What effects have you seen from yours? Do you wear yours in your pocket on a regular basis, or do you just pull it out occasionally? Like, how do you use it?
The places that I find safe, like at home or one of my friends' place, I don't take it over where he's at or here in my home. But if it's someplace I'm strange to, I take it for my own, safety of my spirit.
I've never heard of it used that way.
It's a great protective device.
It's only 1.5 inches in diameter, so that'll fit in the pocket easy enough then, Tessa.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's in my back pocket right now, and that's where I generally keep it. which is on the right side, which is where I keep my cell phone. Not at this point because I'm doing Periscope over here. No video tonight, all audio. But yeah, it makes me wonder if it does have a positive effect as far as protecting you from the elements that your cell phone can put into you. You know, the different waves and different radiation and different things coming from this device that we either have up to the side of our head when we're talking, or, you know, I see the kids these days hunched over with the cell phone to their face. And like I said earlier, girls have their phones in their bras or in their pocket. Like, where do you put it where it's accessible without having it on your body? It's like virtually impossible, and it's kind of like a setup, you know? We know it's not good for us, but we still carry it.
I only carry it when I have to go somewhere, you know, let my family and friends know where I'm at. You know, with Uber and the bus system here, you can click on share. You know, where your ride is.
Mm-hmm.
And the people that need to know where I'm at, they know where I'm at all times. Just in case I fall or something, they know where I'm at. I'm safe.
Man, the kids are coughing up a storm right now. It hit both of them all of a sudden. Well, another thing that I wanted to talk about that was brought up was the ozone layer, or the magnetic layer that protects our Earth from certain things, including radiation from the sun and solar flares, so on and so forth. And Harvard actually had a program where they would take these helium balloons up into the atmosphere and release not only aluminum, but diamond dust and other things to try to repair this. The only issue is, if you put too much, then you cause all kinds of natural disasters like hurricanes and tornadoes, so on and so forth. If you put too little, it doesn't do any good. So you have to have the mixture just right. And how do you know how that really works? I mean, up there things are a lot different than down here. Do you think it helps, or do you think it's harming us in one form or another? I know we have chemtrails, which is something totally different, still having aluminum and other things in those. I mean, these are two different programs using kind of the same makeup. And I think for two different reasons. A lot of people think that the chemtrails are like a HAARP thing, or weather control, or even mind control, some people have said. But what are your guys' thoughts on chemtrails and what certain societies like Harvard and such are trying to do for our ozone layer? Do you think it's helping or harming?
I don't see how it can actually do any good, because it's you're trying to control the solar output. That's effectively what they're trying to do. I don't know. I mean, we're guessing actually what its actual purpose is, because I've never said what the chemtrails are for. As people have analysed some of the stuff when they come down to the ground, out the atmosphere, and they landed on the ground. So what is it for? Is it some sort of kind of anti-radar? Or I'm trying to see how it's going to stop. If it's aluminum, then it's going to act as a reflective agent.
Mm-hmm.
What is it going to reflect? I mean, what kind of radiation? And what
like the solar flares and such, I think, is what they're trying to protect against.
I don't think
it's causing other issues.
I don't think it's going to do much good against a solar flare.
Right?
Yeah, I know.
Good luck with that.
I mean, if we get a major one, you know, as I've said before, we're going to be without electricity. And I've got a 12-volt heavy-duty battery to keep it charged up. And that's for emergency purposes if the electricity is gone from a solar flare. And if I protect it properly, you can, and the equipment, you just wrap it in tinfoil and stick it under the bed. It's it only lasts as long as the charge is in the battery, and after that, you know, there'll be nothing. So unless you've got one of those, those hand crank generators you used to see in the army using during wartime film, unless you get one of them, you're never transmit again. I'm just seeing how much is going to come for 2 discs.
So you said wrapping it in tin foil. What does that do? Does that protect it from outputting the energy and keeping it within? What does that do exactly?
It stops the radiation affecting the components inside. To protect the transistors, CPUs of any kind, they would all be fried. If you've got one of the really old transceivers, these are valve operated, won't affect them. But again, you're relying on a 230 volt AC supply for something like that. And if you get no electricity, it's never going to run. Might run off a 12 volt battery, but again, when you're out of power, that's it, unless you've got the hand crank generator. But that's the idea behind that. Wrap it up in tin foil. It'll reflect. It's a reflective agent, same as aluminum in the atmosphere. But I don't know about that. Jury's still out on that one, I think. $21.98 for a wallet-sized plate and a 1-inch positive energy disc. So I'll need to find out how much it's going to cost. Shipping estimator. Click on that and see. Then I'll get hit with import duty.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if you go to purpleplates.com, she actually gets some plates returned due to, people are really weird about their stuff. If there's a scratch or a scuff or whatever on it, she has plates that are used that are there. And that's why I asked James about, do you have to cleanse it or do anything like that? Because I've allowed other people around me to be able to partake in it. Like, here, take my purple plate and use it for a week or 2 or whatever, and see if it works for you. So I wondered if there's any sort of energy transfer between different users or if there's anything that you need to do in order to cleanse it. So that's why I asked him, and it was pretty cool. It basically does its own thing.
Yeah. Well, it's only $12 shipping, so that's no problem. But I'm going to go and order them. Probably, as I say, I'm going to have to pay import duty on it. So much for the good deal that Mr. Trump guarantees us, yeah. Donald.
Yeah.
Go and stay
go and stay on your golf course, Donald, because you're bugger all good for anything else.
Right.
I can't wait to tell him to bugger off at the end of his year. My vote.
Yeah, but sometimes what's going to follow in is actually worse than what went before. Welcome, please sign in.
Yeah, there's so many scary, crazy things going on in the world we live today. And even though, Jim, you and I, and all of us here in the room are so far apart, we're still so close together, and things that we know are going on. And it's amazing how the media is owned by the same, seems like the same people each time. And so you're getting these filtered and other things going on. And I've heard repeatedly, go watch the BBC because it's unfiltered. It's got, everything you need to know right there. And it's amazing to me how much more people in other countries know truly what's really going on in our country, and how blind people that live here are, that are just eating it up. And I don't know. Trump really scares me. I'm afraid of the angry orange, and not because of who he is, but just the disrespect he has for people in other countries like North Korea. Are you serious? You're going to talk to this person that is very unstable like that? In the Orient, talking to somebody disrespectfully is like a dying offense. Like, they're going to kill you over that. And so for you to do that puts not only him, but ourselves in danger. And so, as soon as he was elected, I just said, we're all going to die. And it's not going to be nice. And I'm surprised we're still here. As many times as he's offended so many other leaders and things like that going on, my mind is blown. My head is blown up several times and regrown. But I'm just amazed as far as what's really going on here and how people are just accepting it. How do you accept that?
To the normal, Tessa. I feel the same way.
That to me is paranormal. Like, the paranormal to me is, everyday life. But for me, that's paranormal. This is not normal.
Geopolitics is paranormal. for for paranormal beings like you and I, Tessa, the paranormal is normal, but politics is paranormal. You don't make sense, does it?
No, not at all.
I read France Channel 24 and other French and German TV and radio on my computer, and I learn a lot about my own country doing that. There's a lot more news about the U.S. than from what's coming inside here. Is that strange, Tess?
Not at all, but in the forefront of my mind, again, is the coronavirus. Not only is it decimating people in China, which, I mean, there's so many people over there, and they have really big tolls going on, and like Jim had said, 97 just today, added on to the 900 and whatever that's going on. And now it's here in the United States. What are we going to do? And you see in 1820, 1920, and somebody also said 1918, there's different very massive plagues that took a lot of people off the earth. It makes you wonder, is this manufactured? Because over there in that area, I keep having the name in my mind, and once I want to say it, I can't say the name of this place in China. But here it was Montauk,
It's
an
called
island.
Wuhan.
Huh?
It's called Wuhan. That's the
Wuhan,
where
yes.
patient zero is.
Yeah, here it was Montauk Island, where they had so many different things going on, different critters with different viruses that they were injecting and testing and blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden they just totally leave this place. And, you know, it makes you wonder about Lyme's disease and all these other things going on. Now we have the coronavirus from an area where it's known that they do these biological tests and different chemical warfare and such over there as well. Is this something from there? And we've heard there is a cure for it. Why aren't we using it? Well, it's because, like they were saying with the Georgia Guidestones, you know, we're only supposed to have so many people on this earth. So what better way to get rid of them than a plague? There's so many different things going on as far as our diets here in America are outlawed in so many countries, but it's a way of killing us off through heart disease, diabetes, other things like that. Like our food we should not be eating. It's insane what they're allowing. The amounts of radiation in our fish, and it goes up, like I said before, every year. Yeah, you can have this. It's okay. It's only this much on the Geiger count, but that's really way too much for us as humans. And it is really decimating our DNA structure. It's insane.
They found success with BCX 4430 against coronavirus, so that's the unimproved drug for Ebola. It works against. It's broad spectrum. It don't even work with influenza virus, but they're testing it on coronavirus, and it's been effective 86% of the time in the trials.
I don't know, but something smells fishy.
97 ain't bad though. The common influenza A virus kills almost 300 people a day during the worst part of the flu season.
Yeah, this flu season has been very hardcore.
So 97, I hate to say it, it's actually not that bad, for an airborne virus. Because I see worse in my research of other, like common cold and flu, get higher death tolls than that worldwide.
Mooney's saying in the chat, and I don't know why he's not in here on the pre-after party, but he said, Tessa, at least 2 of your guests are islanders. If they were to find out within the next 30 minutes that the coronavirus was discovered in widespread outbreaks in several locations on their island, but authorities were not stating where just of yet, what would they do? So, Jim and Sandra, what would you do if the coronavirus was on your island?
Really wouldn't do anything. There's not much else you can do. You've got to move about. You've got to go into stores, supermarkets where, a whole congregation of people, like an airport. So the virus is going to be there in any case. And I just carry on as normal.
Yes.
If it hit the village, there were about 15 people in the village had it. It's just a case of stay indoors and see if it dies down. They say maybe 30 days or something like that. But you're going to be housebound for 30 days, cabin fever. I know there'd be nail marks going down the wall. So I think I would just carry on as normal because there's nothing much else you can do, I don't think. And they don't have a vaccine for it. And if they did, I wouldn't have it anyway. So tough. That's what I would do. Just carry on as normal.
Right? It's
Yes,
kind of
what
scary
you do.
for you, Jim, because your mailman is nice enough to come all the way up to your door and knock and say, "Here you go, Mr. Morris. Here's your package for today." Who's to say he's not carrying something as far as the virus that you could get even though you try to stay at home and away from it? He's knocking on your door, giving you your package, and just saying, "Hello, Mr. Morris, here's your package," could transfer that virus to you.
Yeah, so could Bill and Sue's dog next door. It gave Bill that double bacterial virus thing. So if you're going to get it, you're going to get it.
Right.
That's true.
Somebody pointed out a lot of the bubble wrap packaging we get is coming from China. And these are air bubbles inside. They might have the coronavirus in it as well. You can go paranoid over this. I'm not going to puncture that, no. If I bust that bubble, I could end up with coronavirus. I don't know. I would just carry on. I don't see any other way. Really.
Yeah, I'm not going to panic because coronavirus has been known for years. It does cause cold and flu symptoms, the other strains. They've been around for as long as medical science has been around. It's just the only reason why it's panicking is because it's the first time it's ever been aggressively isolated, and the casualty rates are the same as standard flu if you think about it.
Yeah, well, that's a purple plates order, Tessa. For a small plate, Amazon were wanting £25, which is about $26.
Well,
And I got it from Coherence website for $9.99. So the whole lot came to £30. That would be £25 for a small disc, and £64 for the wallet, $39.99 for the rectangular one. So I got both. Greatly reduced cost, and the import, the carriage was only $12 to send it here from the States. So it's much cheaper just to buy it from purpleplates.com than to buy it on Amazon.
yeah.
I mean, that's a big difference. Big difference.
And it's interesting that the purple plates are kind of obsolete now, and the little golden disc is what you really want to get because, like somebody was saying in the chat, it's like 56 times stronger than this original purple plate, which is really awesome. So if you can get one, definitely try for whether it's the little round golden disc or the larger one to get one of those because it'll have an even better and fuller strength effect on different things than the original purple plate would. Even though that's what I got in my pocket right now, like I wish I had one of those golden discs. I'd have this one in my back pocket and the other one in my front on the opposite side.
So I went to the website and I couldn't see them, the golden ones. They said they were still doing something with them, working at them or doing whatever, but there was none there, Tess. It was just the purple plates. That was all I could see on their website, Coherence website.
I was also gifted a purple plate from Corrine, but I leave it under my pillow. I keep forgetting to put it on, so... But I think it works.
I think it does too.
Yeah, I just get out of the habit of wearing it all the time, so I should. But it stays under the pillow, and I forget about it.
Yeah, and it does have positive effects, and it's funny, like, I have mine in my jacket, and it's wintertime, and I even wear my jacket in the house most of the time because it's so cold. It's actually been nice the last 3 days. Like, I'm not wearing a jacket right now. It's almost spring sort of type weather going on. And Colorado weather is quite bipolar, so tomorrow it might be freezing ass cold. Who's to say? We won't know till we get there, you know. And if you don't like the weather, generally 5 to 10 minutes later it changes.
Same here.
Right? But Sandra, we're down to our last 2 minutes and 40 seconds. The whole island thing. If something broke out there as far as the coronavirus, what would you do?
Well, we're supposed to be prepared for earthquakes here, so I guess the best thing would just be prepared. You can't get off. You wouldn't be able to get off the island, I guess. So you'd have to ride it out and hope for the best.
Just hope it all
But I
works out.
guess, yeah, we shall see how bad this can be. We have no idea yet, really.
Yeah. We've never had this, so it's something different. Well, we are at the end of our time, but I just wanted to thank you, Sandra Heath and Mighty Man Christopher Wayne Fisher and Mr. Jim Morris for hanging out with us for the last part of the show. And we shall continue on from here. But thank you again for coming in and helping me pass the last bit of time.
Good night, everybody.
It's nice. It's nice to have a talk with people that's on the same wavelength.
It is nice.
Yeah.
I like it a lot. It's quite addictive for me to find a place of peace and happiness, which you guys are for me. But thank you again for coming on. I love you guys. I can't wait for the after party, which you guys can join in. Just give us a call at 1-970-335-9596 or look me up at tessa.n.thomas30, and that's THOMAS 30. Hopefully we'll get you in. Skype has been quite a stingy critter. But thank you to all of our friends on We Are Paradox Media's Facebook, Spreaker, Twitter, Periscope, iHeartRadio, and wherever else you may be listening beyond the Omniverse tonight. I had a wonderful time this evening, and I can't wait to do it again this next weekend. And happy before Valentine's Day, you guys. On Saturday, we have A Taste of Tantra with Miss Oksana Lovick and Andre Knight. And then on Sunday, we have the amazing Robbie Thomas, who is a psychic profiler. He's worked with so many police stations to help missing people, and he works on the paranormal side. It's quite intriguing. And he's been on my bucket list for a while, so I'm pretty excited about that. But you guys, don't forget, we're all in this together. Together, we can make the world a little better. And together, my friends, we are Paradox Media, because without you, there is no us. Until next time, nighty night, love and light.
Have a good night.